What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going through my round 24 AFL tips. It's the last round of the AFL season, so let's see how we did last week. So last week I had a pretty good week. I got the 8 out of 9. So we started off on the Friday night for the first game of the doubleheader. We had my Saints taking on the Bombers. The Saints ended up winning by 2. I thought we'd win by a bit more. I backed us in by 20. Look, credit to the Bombers, they still had a young squad, but even though we still had a bit of a younger squad, well, not as young as the Bombers, but even though we had a young squad, they really took it up to us. And yeah, look, we only were 2-point winners in the end. I guess you could say we got a bit lucky. So it wasn't the most convincing win, but a win's still a win. And we've won 4 in a row. So yeah, been getting it done lately, not as convincingly though. Then this was the game this was the only game I got incorrect. The Fremantle-Brisbane tip. Yeah, look, what about that performance from the Lions? They were just really great. They got Fremantle in all areas of the contest, and they only held them to the 5 goals. And while it was an inaccurate day for Freo kicking-wise, they still couldn't get it done for Nat Farf, unfortunately. So, yeah, look, Brisbane absolutely demolished them. Got the GWS tip correct. That was the main upset that I ended up getting correct. Good tip for me there. Got the Carlton tip correct. Wasn't expecting a 54-point win for the Blues, but credit to them there. Got the Hawthorn Melbourne tip correct with the close scoreline. Just kind of how I expected the game to go. I thought maybe Melbourne could show a bit more fight, but the Hawks were just far too good in the end. And Luke Spruce has announced his retirement as well there, so pretty sad news there. Got the Adelaide tip correct, even though it was controversial fashion. What a game that was. The Crows, for the first time in 9 years since 2016, have finally knocked off Collingwood at home in a close 1-2 to get a bit of payback. Went with North Melbourne, wasn't expecting it to be a 48-point win, but credit to them. Really, when you do look at it on paper, the Roos should have probably won by that amount with them being about 3 years ahead in the rebuild. So credit to them there, putting on a massive score. Then the next game, I got the Geelong tip correct as well. Was maybe expecting a little bit more of a closer game, but credit to the Cats blowing the Swans out of the water there. Then the Eagles tip, the Bulldogs tip. Got that one correct as well. Pretty self-explanatory there. That was an absolute thrashing with the Dogs winning by 94 points. So let's see the week games for this week. Now, it is the last round of the AFL, and usually there are lots of banger games, but again, another Thursday/Friday night game that isn't really the best to watch. We do have another dead rubber game between Essendon taking on Carlton. So look, this is obviously not Essendon's last game for the season. They obviously have another game coming up later in the week. But for the Blues, this is their last game for the season, obviously. And, I felt like they just had an impressive win last week against Port Adelaide. They've announced Fossey will be coaching for 2026. And they just showed a bit more maturity and took advantage of Port's outs. Harry Mackay having a massive field day, kicking 7, obviously, with Kerner not being in the side. So he took massive advantage on another game back. So, yeah, look, the Blues, they had a really good start. They kicked the first 6 goals of the game and just showed their fans a bit like the Carlton that we did see a couple of years ago or last year that were much more exciting. And, yeah, look, it was a great win for the Blues under the roof at Marvel. As for the Bombers, well, as I said, against the Saints, they were very competitive with a really young squad. Coming up against the Saints. And, yeah, look, they looked really exciting. Unfortunately, though, they did just make a few mistakes late in the game that really costed them of a win. And for the Bombers, they've lost 11 in a row. So, yes, they'll be tanking for draft picks here, but I feel like this is another small chance maybe for a win. I know that the Blues came off an impressive win against the Power, but you always feel like, I'm pretty sure this is an Essendon home game. It's at Marvel Stadium. You never know. I could see the Bombers getting up here. The Blues realistically should be winning this. Maybe they might risk a couple of the players, bring in some more kids. I do expect there to be a few changes, but I'm going to go the Blues. I don't think this is going to be a big win, though. I think the Bombers, they've lost 11 in a row. They played really competitive football over the last few weeks against Geelong, Sydney, and St Kilda. So I feel like they will be pretty decent against the Blues here, but I'm going to go the Blues by 6 points. I think we'll see a bit more of a fight from Essendon here, but I'm going to go the Blues by 6 points in a pretty actually decent game of football on the Thursday night, and I think the Blues win this one. We move over to Friday night. Again, not really the most interesting clash, but it is very interesting for one side, that being the Pies taking on the Ds. And that obviously one interesting side is for the Pies. Look, the Pies, they're on a 3-game losing streak at the moment. And you almost feel like Collingwood probably should have won that game. There were a couple of controversial decisions. Riley Thilthorpe kicking that ball. In my opinion, I probably think that wasn't a free kick. He was just trying to give it back to the umpire, but you can absolutely disagree and maybe say they were robbed. But nonetheless, I feel like they just really stuffed up a couple of areas that probably it did cost them a game along with the umpiring. Sometimes they were just really thumbly around the ball. Their pressure was great, though. They did make Adelaide, I guess, throw the ball a lot, which a lot of people are saying on the media. But, I feel like this should be a game they should be winning. Obviously, Melbourne, obviously, they're under their new coach, Troy Chaplin. And after showing pretty good fight against the Bulldogs, they probably weren't as good against the Hawks. Their inability to score was just back, and the Hawks just mastered the D's games. Darwin certainly didn't let them do what they did to the Dogs, the D's. So, look, maybe this is a small chance here for the D's to get a win for the last game of the season for their fans, but I just can't really see it. I know the Pies do have still quite a few outs, and they're not really the favourites coming into the final series, and they could still actually, I believe, miss the eight. I don't think they will, though. It'll be very unlikely for them to miss the eight. I don't think they can anymore, but they can definitely miss out on top four if they don't win this. So, yeah, look, I just feel like the Pies, they know they have top fours on the line. I feel like they're left for the occasion. So I'm going to go the Pies here by a bit more of an amount than some people are expecting. I'm actually going to go the Pies in this one by 43 points. I just think they'll demolish Melbourne at the moment because Melbourne, they just have no hope. And yeah, look, they need to find a new coach. So yeah, I think the Pies win this by 43 points at the MCG. I actually forgot there was another Friday night game now. This is obviously not because the AFL wanted another double header on the Friday night. It's obviously because of the Cyclone game that got recancelled and rescheduled, I should say. So the Gold Coast actually have to play on the Friday night in ability to be able to get full rest and recovery to fly back over to the Gold Coast, over to Queensland, play the match against the Bombers on the Wednesday. So this game is on the Friday night, and yet again, kind of more of a dead rubber game. Although the Suns, this is a very important game for them. Again, when you're playing the Power away, no matter where you're on the ladder, you can always be considered a bit of a danger game. But we'll start off with the Power. I thought they were a little bit disappointing against the Blues. I'm not going to lie. I was expecting a much more closer contest. That just wasn't to be. The defenders, yet again, got put under the pump just by the Port Adelaide players, lacking that pressure in the midfield, and Mackay ended up kicking 7. So, look, they just got absolutely dominated the Power, and they did kind of just control that match a bit more, got on more even terms with the Blues for those last 3 quarters after the Blues had a really massive start. But, yeah, look, the game was pretty much done and dusted after the Blues kicked the first 7 goals of the game, or 6 or 7 goals of the game. So, the Power, pretty disappointing display. They're going down by the 54 points, but they're coming up against the Suns here, who, again, were, I guess you could say, kind of disappointing against the Giants. I feel like a lot of people would expect them to win that game. I obviously tipped the Giants, but, yeah, look, the Suns, they just allowed the Giants to move the ball far too easily, and they wouldn't want to be doing this against the Power, even though the Power did go down by a big amount to a side that they probably should have played close against. We saw them a couple of weeks ago at home play some really good football against Fremantle. They just weren't able to get the job done there. So, this is massive stakes as well for Port Adelaide. This is Ken Hinkley's last game as coach. It's Travis Boak's last game. So the Power I do expect to be up and about. And I just can't really see the Suns really coming over here and thrashing the Power. So maybe there is that belief for the Power to get a win here. And if the Suns lose this, they could still miss finals, even though they do have the game against the Bombers. They should be winning. I'm going to go the Suns. I think this is a chance to show some real maturity. I know they have shown quite a bit of maturity this season, but this is a massive stakes. So the Power, they'll be up and about. It's Ken's last game as coach, but I'm going to go the Suns. A bit of a letdown for the Power, but, I'm going to go the Suns by 26 points at the Adelaide Oval on the Friday night. We move on to the next game now on the Saturday, where we do have North Melbourne taking on the Crows under the roof at Marvel. I can't actually remember the last time these two sides played at Marvel. It always feels like they're playing down in Tassie or at the Adelaide Oval. But anyway, we still do have North playing. And what about their game last week? Obviously, the record is Harry Sheezel breaking the disposal count, tying the all-time record up there with Tom Mitchell with 54. He had an absolute brilliant game, kicked the 2 goals, I believe. And yeah, look, North, it was a really close affair since half-time, but that is the future right there. They showed plenty of maturity against the Tigers, and if they would have lost that match, you just be looking back at them as a joke club. But they really should be beating the Tigers. I know it's a lot, 48 points for a side that's been pretty crap over the last few years, but they are still 3 years ahead in the rebuild. So I just think you can say, oh yeah, it was a great win for North Melbourne. She's had a good game, but I think you move past it because that's what this club will want to be doing, not just grading these wins. They should be winning by 8 goals, really, when you're 3 years ahead in the rebuild. So yes, it was a very good win for North, but that's what they needed to do, and they put on a really big score. So credit to them down in Tassie for the last game, I believe. that will be played there, which is a bit sad. So hopefully they can find a new stadium. But as for the Crows, they're on a roll at the moment. Maybe not as convincing in their last couple of games. Obviously against the Eagles, they got took up to the sword, and now obviously Isaac Rankin might be suspended for that racial slur. So this, I feel like, Adelaide wouldn't want to be taking this game too lightly. Yes, North have nothing to play for. They're fresh off a win. So, usually when these bottom teams do come off a win, it's not necessarily a game that they go into yet again expecting a win, but I could definitely see them making this a close game. And again, the Crows have been challenged in their last few games, especially against Collingwood as well. They honestly could have lost that game if it wasn't for a few umpiring decisions. So I do think the Crows win this, but I don't think by much. I'm going to go the Crows here, but the 28 points, they've got that top spot locked up now pretty much if they can just win this game. So yeah, I'm going to go the Crows by 28 points at Marvel. We head over to the next game now at the MCG, where we do have Geelong taking on Richmond. We'll start off with the Tigers. So obviously against North, they were pretty disappointing going down by the 8 goals, but I thought there are still a few highlights. They still ended up kicking the 13 goals, and it was just a really poor day out from the Tigers. But they're going to have some of those losses, and even though it was still only against North Melbourne, they probably shouldn't have lost by that much. But North, yeah, look, they probably should have been won that game, as I said, by a goal. So but obviously they let Harry Sheezel get 54 disposals, so no one was really on him, and it was just a poor day out defensively for the Tigers. As for the Cats, well, they got the win against the Swans, and Jezza actually didn't kick any goals, so yeah, he's definitely confirmed not to kick 100. He was never going to kick 100 in the regular season, but there is still a chance maybe in finals for him to kick 100, but I think they would have to make a grand final for that to happen. So this is a chance for him, though, to redeem himself, because they're coming up against the Tigers, and you think they should be able to win this game pretty comfortably. I do like how the Geelong are playing, even though they haven't played some really decent sides, they played the Swans, who at home as well, especially a challenge, even though the Swans aren't anywhere close to making the 8. That was meant to be their big test, and they absolutely demolished the Swans. So, yeah, the Cats, 43-point winners there, and for me, the impressive part has been Sean Manor and Tyson Stengel, and a couple of the other guys like Shannon Neal being able to find the goals and just not relying on Jeremy Cameron, which I think to me is an absolute weapon in the finals. That's a flex. So, yeah, look, I can't see Richmond winning this game at all. I think this is going to be a thrashing to the Cats. It is at the MCG, so I don't expect it to be a 100-point or anything like that, but the Cats should be winning this really convincingly. I'm going to go the Cats by 75 points at the MCG. Then we do move over to Optus Stadium for the Saturday night game now, and we have another dead rubber game here between the Eagles and the Swans. We'll start off with the Eagles. Well, after a pretty decent performance against Adelaide, they came over to Marvel Stadium, absolutely got pumped by 94 points. Look, they're going to have some of those losses, and it's pretty much safe to say that they only have the 1 win for the year, and which is the lowest win-loss record. So that no team has only won a game since GWS in 2012, which obviously doesn't really count since they were a new side and they were just absolutely crap since then. So it's one of the worst seasons of all time for the Eagles, but they still haven't had a 100-point loss this season. So, there've been some good performances in there, some strong performances. But, yeah, look, coming up against the Swans here, I guess you could say maybe disappointing against the Cats, after being the Brisbane the week before. Maybe they were tired over from the flight from Brisbane, even though it's not that far. But, yeah, look, the Cats just did their business, and they just weren't really on defensively, the Swans. But this is a game, surely you'd expect them to win. I know it is away from home, and West Coast against Adelaide played pretty well, but you'd expect the Swans to win here. I don't think it's going to be like a 80-point thrashing or anything like that, but I'm going to go the Swans. This is an obvious tip here. I think the Swans should be winning this quite convincingly, so I'm going to go the Swans in this one by the 39 points on the Saturday night. Then we move on to the first Sunday game now, where we do have the Giants taking on the Saints. We'll start off with the Saints. 4 wins on the trot, and it does feel good as a Saints fan to finally be getting some wins on the board. Obviously, they haven't really been that convincing, though, against North, Richmond, Essendon. Those sides that we have played, we've only won by, I believe, a margin of, it's 17 points. So we will be looking to improve on that, but a win's a win, and it does show a bit more maturity against the younger sides that we can hold on to in those close games. Obviously, massive news at the time of recording this earlier out in the day. It did come as a massive relief for Saints fans, and Isaiah Wanganeen-Miller is signing a 2-year extension, and while it's only 2 years, it's an absolute privilege to just keep him. We do want to thank Nasiah on behalf of the fan base for sticking with us, and hopefully now we can see the progression plan for the next couple of years. So definitely a bit of relief around the Saints, and this is a game against the Giants that you can't really see them winning. I mean, the Giants just played really well against the Suns, and I felt like the Suns were pretty lazy, to be honest. But the Giants just absolutely dominated the Suns, removing it from their halfback 50. I think they had a record-breaking stat. They scored 4 goals off of their halfback without the Suns even getting a touch on it. So that was really embarrassing for the Suns, but great for the Giants. And yeah, look, they would be looking for finals now. If I believe they can still make the top 4. Maybe not. I'm not sure, but yeah, look, I just can't really see us winning this game as a Saints fan. We are giving the young kids a run. So hopefully we can be more competitive, though. I do want to see a bit more of a high-scoring game. We haven't been able to find many goals. So, I'll be happy if we walk out with 12 or 13 goals and still lose by, 6 goals. I'll be fine with that, but I think the Giants should be winning this pretty convincing. I'm going to go the Giants here by 32 points at NG. Then we do move on to arguably the biggest game of the round, and which is the biggest game of the round, mind you. It's the Bulldogs taking on the Dockers. Look, coming into this game about 4 weeks ago, we kind of knew this was going to be the preview, and it might not have been if Fremantle had won that game against Brisbane and was locked in the final spot, but they are now under pressure again, the Dockers, after going down to the Lions by 57 points. And we'll start off with the Dogs. Let's just get them out of the way. Look, obviously against the Eagles, it was a really good performance, just thrashing the Eagles. They didn't need to thrash them. They could have won by 50 points. Percentage doesn't matter. And this is the danger, on the other hand, for Fremantle. Their percentage is really crap. Lose this, Bulldogs win, they miss the finals. So this is a massive game. And yeah, look, against Brisbane, I mean, what can I say? They were very inaccurate, but that didn't really reflect the scoreboard at the end of the day. It wasn't even their ball movement that was poor. Yes, obviously, they played a very slow brand of football again. It was their pressure. Their pressure was just really poor, and the Lions dominated. Zach Bailey had a couple of goals. They just let him run loose, and it was just disappointing at home. You wouldn't expect a 57-point loss, and this is why you probably just can't back in Fremantle and win the premiership. I know they do have a really good list, but when they put out performances like that, it really does question whether they can actually do something in September. So I think this is going to be this should be a good game. The Dockers, I think would have lots of belief to get a win here. Nat Five, they obviously couldn't get a win for Nat Five's last game as well, but I feel like under pressure, the Dockers definitely can come out and play here. They don't play necessarily their best football at Marvel Stadium, but this is going to be a close game, but I'm going to go the Bulldogs. I genuinely think the Dogs, they probably deserve to make the 8. They've had a lot of injuries this year, and I think I'm going to go the Bulldogs. This would not shock me one bit if Fremantle do win this game, but unfortunately, I think it might happen again for the Dockers. They might miss the 8 again, but I'm going to go the Bulldogs here by 11 points in a massive game here at Marvel Stadium. Then we move over to the Gabba now for the second last game of the round, technically, where we do have the Lions taking on the Hawks. This is also another massive game because, yeah, look, obviously Fremantle do beat the Western Bulldogs. Both of these, Hawthorn is safe because the Hawks could, no, they can't miss the 8, sorry. So both these sides have locked in for finals positions. And it's going to be interesting to see now how that final ladder does play out in the 8. Obviously there's 9 teams to it. Who will miss out? Bulldogs or Fremantle? And it's down to these 2 teams here against Brisbane and Hawthorn for the last game of the round. And we'll start off with the Lions. Look, they were massive winners. Again, they've been such a weird team. Obviously missing Lockie Neal. They came out the week before losing to the Swans by 2 points, who definitely like a few positions below them. Then against Fremantle, they come all the way over to Perth, of like a 4-hour, 3-hour trip, and they absolutely demolished the Dockers. It's honestly just so weird how Brisbane, were known for this great side at the Gabba. Now they're probably better, they prefer to be playing away than at home. And yeah, look, coming up against the Hawks here, this is no easy task because the Hawks, they're back in form, had some really good wins over the likes of Collingwood and then Melbourne last week, doing what they needed to do in Luke Bruce's retirement game. Yeah, look, he kicked, I think, 2 goals, so they were really good. Jack Gunston's having a good game. So Hawthorn do have a really good record against Brisbane. I know Brisbane did win the last game at the MCG, but Hawthorn have always had the wood over Brisbane here, and Brisbane, they're back at home. They should be winning this game, but I'm feeling a slight upset just to end off the round here. The Lions don't even play their best footy at home. It wouldn't shock me if the Hawks came out of win. I do sit 9th in this tipping competition, so I'm actually doing quite well. So I probably should back in the home team, but I'm going to go the Hawks here. I honestly think this is a good chance for them to upset the Lions, and I feel like maybe we could get an upset down to the round here. So I'm going to go the Hawks here, and a bit more of an upset here by 7 points at the Gabba. So everyone, those are my tips. Now, there is another game on the Wednesday, obviously the rescheduled Cyclone game, as I said before, Gold Coast taking on the Essendon. Look, we don't know how these 2 teams are going to be coming to play here, but this should be a pretty obvious tip regardless of the results, whether Essendon beat Carlton or, Gold Coast lose to Port here, but I think the Suns should be winning this game. So obviously, I will still be tipping this game. I may as well put my tip in. It honestly won't really matter, but Suns probably should be winning this game. So I'm going to go the Gold Coast here by the 38 points in Carrara Stadium. So that is the final game of the year. So now we move on to finals. It's going to be interesting to see how this last round does play out. Let me know your thoughts and predictions down below in the comments. It's going to be a massive last round, and we'll see you in the next video.